What up, everybody? Just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody who's supported Lockdown Universe for the past 3 years. I really appreciate you. And if you've been thinking about a way to support, but you didn't have $1.99 to support for each month, that is okay. If you want to just buy me a coffee, there's an option for you to just buy me a coffee inside the description of each episode moving forward. So just highlight that, put it in your browser. You can go right there and buy me a coffee or 2 or 3. I like coffee. Who doesn't? And I would really appreciate it. And it would keep me awake enough to make more podcasts for you guys. So I would appreciate that. And just wanted to let you know. Thanks for that. And thanks for supporting the podcast. Let's get to the show. What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Lockdown Universe, home of the bizarre, peculiar, and unheard of stories of UFO legend and paranormal lore. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy to be back. Hopefully you guys are doing excellent and taking care of yourselves. So today I wanted to talk about the pseudo-bear, pseudo-Wolverine entity that was created in the base that Emery Smith worked at. Which he never does give the name of, although he does say it's in the Kirtland Air Force Base. So I believe he does say he was working with Los Alamos, and within the Kirtland Air Force Base, there's tons of different bases inside there. But one of the things that was really interesting, I actually decided to go down the rabbit hole back through the archives on Gaia, because I've watched all 21 seasons. And Emery Smith's gotten older. He's gotten a little bit grayer. He started off gray on the show years ago, and now he's the host. But back when he was being one of the first guests on the show, he was super nervous. He wasn't as calm and relaxed as he is now as a host. And he started to talk, about a lot of things that I covered, but there was a couple things I totally missed. And one of those really interesting aspects is what he talks about surrounding the security of the base, and how some of these beings that they had within the base actually escaped. Now, one of the podcasts I had done not too long ago talked about Richard Doty's experience as kind of being an MIB agent and going out there and recollecting, being the Tommy Lee Jones at the beginning of MIB, going out and collecting that slime monster that they blast out in the desert. That was basically Richard Doty, and he stated that they had beings that would escape in the 80s and 90s, which is interesting because Emery Smith also corroborated those stories, although his story was not told through Emery Smith. It was actually told through his brother-in-law, who worked security on the base. So this is really interesting because, what Emery states is that basically it's so compartmentalized. All the information is kept secret. And sometimes even the government will put in disinformation into your pocket so that they can see where it comes from, right? They want to see who's lying, who's talking, and they want to get rid of them. And what Emery would state would be that these guys would get tossed out. If they were talking after hours to friends or family about their job, government was listening in every way possible. Satellites, phones, emails, Facebook, MySpace, regular mail. They would have a satellite just for you. That's how technical it was, okay? So what's really interesting about this Wolverine bear creation that they made was that Emery uses some really sophisticated language when he talks. Usually it's pretty layman's term, but sometimes he'll throw out something and you're like, whoa, what? And I think that was really apparent in the early episodes of Cosmic Disclosure. This was the second episode ever. Well, I shouldn't say ever, because before this they had Corey Good, but they cut those episodes out with David Wilcox. And now it starts with David Wilcock and Emery Smith. But nonetheless, Emery talks about how this bear was osseo integrated, and David Wilcock's like, "Whoa, what? What are you talking about?" And even I had to look it up because I was like, "What the hell is osseo integrated?" I knew osseo, osteoporosis, had to do something with the bones, but what would osseo integration be? So I looked it up, and it says osseo integration is the scientific term for bone ingrowth into a metal implant. And that's exactly what Emery states. So basically, what they did was down in this base, and we know that in Dulce Base and a lot of these other bases, up to 132 different bases, deep underground military bases, that they do these physical experiments, these DNA experiments, to try to make better creatures, better humans, X-Men, whatever you want to call these different creations. But what they did with this specific creature is that they implanted metal talons into this bear-like creature. And this thing got out. Not only got out, but also got up to the surface, which is particularly interesting because a typical bear in the wilderness is not going to know how to figure out how to get through security, get through up an elevator shaft, get all the way out into the surface. But this bear did. So that tells me that this bear was very intelligent, or this Wolverine bear, whatever you want to call it, was very intelligent. But it really reminds me of the Wolverine, Logan, where he had this adamantium built into him, and it was built into his bones. And Emery couldn't state whether or not this thing had it built into the bear's bones either. Well, I mean the skeleton bones, I should say. It was built into the hand bones because it had these like talon-like claws. So it was really interesting. And so what he stated was that it got out to the surface, it got out into the desert, it started running away, and they had a very specialized vehicle to catch this thing. And this was told by his brother-in-law. And he stated that they went out there and got him. They went out there and used this vehicle. Now, this vehicle was kind of built like the presidential limousine, right? Which they call the Beast. The presidential limousine has 4-inch thick metal, okay, built into it. It built into the frame, so that frame and the body, so that if it can withstand a gunshot. So this vehicle that they had to deal with this humongous Wolverine bear had 8-inch thick walls, metal walls. Okay, you think about the paddy wagon that they use to pick up criminals. Those things don't have 8-inch thick walls, okay? I mean, most of those things probably have is maybe 3-inch, maybe probably 2-inch, right? I mean, the criminal's probably not going to have Wolverine claws to get out, okay? Let's face it. But they knew that if they had to go out and catch a creature like this, that it would need very, very thick walls. What they found out, this is what gets even wilder, is that when they opened up the cage and they were able to, disable this creature, whether they tased it or whatever, which I believe is what they did. They did a combination of tasing and medication, I believe is what Emery states. They looked inside of the paddy wagon, and this thing had clawed into the sides of the paddy wagon, and they could feel it as they were driving back to the base. This thing's like bouncing back and forth, and they're hoping that the tires aren't going to fall off, or not, or like fling them over sideways, right, so that they go on 2 wheels. But they didn't, and they opened the cage. This thing had clawed 4 inches into the 8-inch metal. Could you imagine what that would do to just your fingernails if you tried to claw into the metal? You would do absolutely nothing to that metal. If you had claws in your hand, right? Some sort of metal device, some sort of hacksaw or crowbar, let's say, you would do pretty minimal damage to that, to the walls. I mean, you might scratch it, You might scratch it with a crowbar, but you're not going to be doing much damage. A crowbar is meant to be utilized on wood. And maybe maybe part of a metal door, but you'd have to wedge it in there to have any success. You'd have to have a wedge capability. This thing literally clawed into the 8-inch thick metal, straight thick metal. You know, no grooves in the metal, no doors that it could hook itself into and rip off. No, we're talking about 8-inch thick metal. And that's what's freaking terrifying, is that this thing got all the way up to the surface. How many floors was this thing down? 3? 8? You know? Even if it's down 3 floors, you gotta imagine it would be pretty difficult for it to get up to the front, to the top, and to get out. That's what really blows my mind. Now, the other thing to think about in regards to this Wolverine bear hybrid is that there's so many other hybrids that they're working on in different bases that have been reported, such as Nightmare Hall of the Dulce base, which is on the 8th floor apparently. And none of those really that we know of, that we've heard of, have really gotten out. The vast majority that have gotten out that we've been told by whistleblowers have been either true extraterrestrials that figured their way out, that were smart enough, had the knowledge, the skills to say, okay, I know these primitive, jails. I know how to get out of these things. And the Richard Doty case, he actually stated that this thing figured out how to shut down the electricity, how to get out through like one of the vent pipes or something like that, and then, or the vent exhaust, not a pipe, but like a rectangular exhaust, and get out to the surface. Imagine something with like wings, right? Trying to get out. It would be nigh impossible. I mean, like, because it's not like you can fly out of a floor. You'd have to still get up through some sort of elevator shaft. So it's very interesting to hear that this bear got up to the surface. I wonder what the circumstances were around it. But again, these, there's so much compartmentalization that we didn't get probably the full story. But hopefully we will one day. Anyway, guys, I'm going to move on to the next one. I hope you enjoyed the Wolverine bear story. It is interesting. Could you imagine what kind of devastation this thing would cause if it got out into the main public, cosmopolitan areas, metropolitan areas? Holy smokes. Could you imagine having these like Wolverine-like adamantium claws or adamantium skeletal structure where you'd never break a bone again and maybe you could regenerate again? I mean, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? That'd be lovely to have. Anyway, fun stuff to dream about and think about. Nonetheless, I hope you guys are having an excellent weekend, taking care of yourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally, following through on your hobbies and your goals and your dreams, whatever they may be, and as always, continue to question the universe around you. Until next time, guys, take care, and Lockdown Universe out.